We've somewhat already discussed the topic of divine law and the pragmatic and unbiased approach taken by Themis when creating the laws that mankind and the gods governed by. But today we'll be focusing on the goddess Nemesis and her drastically different view on punishment and retribution. Nemesis was the goddess that would enact retribution against those who performed evil deeds or whom she perceived as having undeserved good fortune. Like so many of the most ancient deities within Greek mythology, Nemesis was just one of the many children of Nyx, and although she was mostly depicted as having no father, there are those who believe that her father could have been anyone from Oceanus to Erebus to perhaps even Zeus. Nemesis went by several names, including Rhamnusia, the goddess of Rhamnus, an ancient coastal city in Greece, and perhaps the most fitting, Adrestia, meaning the inescapable, we can assume referring to her inescapable wrath and retribution. The name Nemesis itself was thought to mean she who distributes or deals out, once again referring to her distribution of punishment, justice, and retribution. The children of Nemesis are a fairly debated topic. Helen of Troy is widely regarded to be the daughter of Zeus and the mortal woman Leda, but there are tales where it was instead Nemesis that was considered Helen's mother. In a last-ditched attempt to avoid the advances of Zeus, Nemesis turned herself into an animal. That animal was a goose. But Zeus, being the ever-persistent god that he was, transformed himself into a swan and mated with Nemesis. Nemesis in this bird form would lay an egg that would be later found by a shepherd, who in turn would give this egg to Leda. Leda would keep this egg in her chest until it hatched, and when it did, she would raise Helen of Troy and assume the role of her mother. Nemesis was seen as being able to measure one's happiness. She could see whether that happiness was too frequent or too excessive, and if she deemed that in some way this happiness was undeserved, she would bring loss and suffering to even out the scales. There's no doubt that the actions of Nemesis still appeared to be somewhat calculated, but nowhere near the level of Themis. Nemesis was still known to act swiftly, with no pity or mercy. We can see Nemesis as directing human affairs in a way that maintains the equilibrium. Those exploiting others or showing excessive hubris towards the gods would be very quickly dealt with, often falling back in line. She was particularly known to concern herself with matters of love, and she makes an appearance in the famous story of Echo and Narcissus. Narcissus was extremely beautiful, but along with his beauty, he was also extremely arrogant, hating all those that dared to fall in love with him. This arrogance angered Nemesis, and so she lured him into a pool where he could see his own reflection in the river, and upon doing so, he fell instantly in love with the image he saw, not knowing that it was in fact his own. Unable to leave the beauty that was his own reflection, he would eventually die. The beauty that Narcissus was gifted was seen by Nemesis as undeserved, and the way he treated those who dared to fall in love with him was enough for the goddess to intervene, and in her punishment, eventually cause his death. Nemesis would often be depicted as a winged goddess, undoubtedly because it would make escape in her pursuit almost impossible. The ancient Greek poet Mesmedes wrote a hymn to Nemesis where he addressed her as Nemesis, winged balancer of life, dark-faced goddess, daughter of justice. She was known to carry with her a sword, a lash, and a dagger to enact punishment, but she would also carry scales, a measuring rod, and a bridle that she would sometimes use to ride her griffin-drawn chariot. Nemesis was a deity in Greek mythology that almost had free reign to do as she pleased. The gods weren't really known to punish mortals unless it was to make an example of particular individuals. This role of punishment and enforcing the law amongst mortals fell to a handful of goddesses, who for the most part did as they were instructed by Themis. Nemesis, being the goddess of revenge and retribution, was of course the exception. She would punish anyone who was seen as disrespecting the gods, and she was even seen as delivering good and bad fortune. I'd love to hear what you think about Nemesis. Do you feel that her vigilante-esque role was necessary, or do you prefer the approach that Themis took when delivering justice? Let me know in the comments below. As always, I've been your host, Mythology and Fiction Explained.